Hello everyone, I'm here today to do my December wrap-up for the last month of 2025, which was a bit of a month. I had to deal with things with Alex's school, and then around the 20-something of December we got really sick. I was in bed for like a whole day because I didn't have energy to get up and stuff. So it has been a month, but I have read some things. I have finished 7 books in December. So the first book that I finished in December is Butter by Asako Yuzuki, which was for a book club. And this is sort of like a murder mystery, not quite. Basically we follow this woman that is supposed to be a journalist, and she gets kind of obsessed with this other woman that is supposed to have killed someone, and she was in jail for it. And the journalist kind of starts trying to put herself in the shoes of the murderer, and one of the big things that this murderer was very obsessed about was food. She was learning how to cook French food, which I did not expect. I know it's called butter and French food has a lot of butter, but it is a Japanese book, so I was expecting Japanese food, but it's mostly French food that is in here. And basically, yeah, we follow this woman kind of obsessing about this murderer and building a connection in a way. And I thought there was a lot of commentary about weight and beauty in Japan, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate that this must have been quite relevant for the topic and the place. However, reading it as a foreigner, it just read very fat phobic. So one of the main things that happens is that the journalist that is following this case starts eating a lot of food because she's trying to teach herself how to cook French food, and they are talking a lot about food, and so she starts eating more and she starts gaining weight. And there is a point in the 100 pages in where she has gained a few kilos and she's now 54 kilos, and everyone at work feels the right to comment on how fat she is. And I'm like, 54 kilos is not fat. I'm not sure how tall this woman is, but 54 kilos is not fat, and everyone is commenting on it, and it's weird. It's so weird. And again, I appreciate that it's not my culture, so maybe it's a lot more relevant in the culture it's from, but in my culture that's very weird. And then at some point in the middle of the book we kind of say like, yeah, that's fat, but we're okay with it. We don't want to build into these beauty standards anymore, which again, okay. Very unhealthy fatphobic things going on. I was hoping for a little bit more of a redemption on that aspect, and it didn't happen. And yeah, I mean, I think there was interesting things in this book, but yeah, it was not the book for me. I think it didn't have enough depth, maybe not the right word, but the criticisms were not developed far enough for my liking. And I think that the idea was interesting, but the execution was not. The next book I read is one that I had to return from to the library, and that was The Ministry of Time by Callian Bradley, which again was one of those books that the idea was really interesting, the execution was very meh. So this book is following mostly, like, there is this organization that is bringing people from previous decades into our current decade, and they have to be people that are about to die from things that now we can prevent, so that they don't change the timeline, because these people were not gonna be in the future anyway because they were gonna die. So they bring them back, they heal them, and then they are assigned to a person on this timeline that takes care of them and shows them the things that are going on and are happening around them. And that is kind of what happens, and that's it. Like that's all that happens. And I was just waiting for something bigger to happen, or I mean, there is a slight plot with this company and what happens to it, but overall, like, really nothing happens. And like, I didn't understand what the point of this book was, what it was trying to say. It was just this concept about people from the past coming here and finding things quirky, and that was kind of it. And I thought it was, from the reviews that I had seen, that they were like really big 5-star reviews or really bad 0-star reviews. I thought it was going to be something more, but this was just like, it was so nothing. It was so nothing. The next book I read was Universality by Natasha Brown, and this basically follows the case of a man that is hit on the head with a bar of gold and dies, and then we kind of follow what happens to lead to that point. It was mostly trying to make commentaries on class in the UK, and also like the identity politics and how that sometimes can clash. Overall tries to explain the polarization of society that we are living at the moment, but I just thought that this discussion was a little bit surface level. Like I was hoping for more. I was hoping for a little bit more meat into it. I thought Assembly from the same author was much better. It was a bit shorter and much like focused. This was, it had a little bit too much tangents and going from one place to the other to really really put the point in what the author was trying to say. I think that this should either have been shorter and punchier, or longer and more developed and deep. But how it was somewhere in the middle, and it didn't deliver in either side of the story. The next book that I read was also for a book club, and that was Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore, which is a romance, which is very unlike me, but it was for a book club. And actually I think this was quite good, because it's not the kind of romance that is just a romance. It's a romance that has a plot line, and there happens to also be this very heavy romantic element to it, which I really appreciated. So this basically follows this girl that decides to go to Oxford University to study, and she is she's sponsored by the suffragist movement in the UK, and so she also is supposed to and is expected to attend certain meetings and be involved in the suffragist fight, which at first she's not very interested in, but as things go on, she gets more into, because she is very into women's rights, and she thinks that women can be the same as men, and so it makes sense for her that they should have the vote. And as part of this suffragist movement, one of the things that these women are trying to do is to target people that have power in the parliament and things like that, men that have power, and try to convince them that women should have the vote. And so the main protagonist meets this very grumpy duke that everyone tells her he's a standoff, he's not gonna go into our side of the fight, but she tells them, well, he's an important guy, obviously, so why not try? And they start to have this banter and this relationship. I didn't like the guy. I think the guy was way too into himself, but I think that she I liked her. I think she was she was obviously still very young, so she was making stupid mistakes, but she was strong, and she was powerful, and she wanted things more than she wanted him, and he had to bend himself to fit in her life rather than the other way around, which I thought was nice. I would have liked it to have more of Oxford, because at some point they move into one of his big houses, and Oxford is kind of forgotten for a big while. So not a perfect book. Again, romances are normally not my thing, but for what it was, I think it was fine. Then the next book that I finished was The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaving Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I hate the title, I always forget it, but this is my first Grady Hendrix, and I quite enjoyed it. It also has a note at the beginning saying that my best friend's exorcism is supposed to be about the friendship of teenage girls, and this looks more into the mothers of communities. And Grady Hendrix talks specifically about how his mother was often overlooked by everybody because she was a housewife in the south of the US, and he wanted to showcase in this book that we should not take housewives for granted, and we should give them the recognition that they deserve. And I think he did that quite well in this book. So this is about this group of women in the south that have a book club, and they read very gritty stuff, which their husbands are a little bit confused about, because they are supposed to be these very like charged, godly kind of women, but they just like a little bit of spice in their lives, so they read true crime and things like that on their free time. And at some point there is this man that moves in the house next to this woman, and he's young, relatively young, and very charming, and so everyone wants to invite him to their house and their families and blah blah, and like make him part of the community. And then strange things start to happen, and at first nobody cares because they are starting to happen in the poorer neighborhoods, but when they start happening in their own neighborhood, people start caring. And this woman says like, this man is a vampire, and obviously everyone thinks that she's crazy and overlooks her, but she keeps thinking this is not normal, there must be an explanation for this, and so we see her going through the steps to uncover who this man actually is. I thought it was very well done, the way that people treat housewives, and I thought it was a good idea, and it was very compelling. It's also divided, so they have these like dividing sections, and each of them is one book from the book club, which was fun. And we also see like the influence that the husbands have into these women, and how sometimes it's not good, sometimes it is questionable how they treat them. And yeah, I thought that whole commentary was very interesting, and I enjoyed it for what it was. The next book that I finished was Patriot by Alexei Navalny, and this is a member from Alexei Navalny, who is an activist, or was an activist in Russia. This mostly focuses between 2019, 2020, 2021 until like 2024, which is when he sadly died in prison in Russia. And basically he was opposing the Putin regime and the corruption of the regime, and so he was in and out of prison a lot. At some point he was poisoned, and that's kind of where we start the book, when he was poisoned and he went to Berlin to be treated for a number of months, and then when he came back, he was in prison again. And then the last 100 pages or so of this book is his diaries in prison until the moment that he died. and it's very impressive. He's a very impressive person for all the things that he did and the way that he was able to subscribe and follow his principles. I think that's very admirable of him. I really admire the work that he did. There are some things that are a little bit, I don't know if criticism, but his narration voice is very yonky. He seems to never take anything seriously, which I don't know if it fitted with the whole topic of the book, but at the same time I can understand for it to be coping mechanisms of the thing that he had to go through in his life. And there's also some, like, there is not a lot of intersectionality in this book. He's obviously a white man that was fighting this very one focus fight on corruption in Russia, which is a very valid and very important fight. And he said that I think his grandmother was Ukrainian, so he also talked a little bit about this, the whole Ukrainian situation and how he felt about it and all of that. But the way that he talked, for example, about his wife, he was very respectful and very in love with her, and he kept saying how amazing she was, or she is. But at the same time, like, he also said at some point that she was more radical than he was in these kind of things, and that's why she always supported him. But if that was the case, if she had more radicals and more strong ideas about these things, why was she not fighting for them, and he would stay at home with the kids while she did that, right? Like, those kind of things. He was a man of his time and his culture, I assume, and still he did very amazing things with his life. And it's very sad that he died in prison. I mean, I was hoping maybe for an epilogue about what happened to him, but there wasn't. There was an epilogue, but it was not about what happened to him in prison. But I could imagine that he was murdered, and it's not a coincidence that he died in prison. But yeah, it was a lot to read. As I said, very impressive man, and I think it's good to read it. I learned a lot about Russian politics and what's going on inside Russia, because we hear a lot about what happens between Russia and Ukraine, or Russia and other countries, but what happens within Russia is also pretty messed up. So I would recommend. But yeah, it's not a perfect book, but I would still recommend. And then the last book that I read this month is The Heart Goes Last by Margaret Atwood, which is a dystopian book. So this book follows Charmaine and Stan, who are a couple that had a very standard life. She was a nurse, he was working in a robotics factory in the Midwest, I think. And there seems to have been an economic collapse, and they both have lost their job together with many other people and their houses and all of that. So at the beginning of the book, they're living in their car, and Charmaine is picking up shifts at a bar here and there. Stan is not working, he's not finding work, and so they're struggling. And all of a sudden they see this advertisement of this communal space that promises to give them everything they need. The only rule is that once they're in, they cannot leave. And so they go there, they check it out, they like it, so they sign up for it. And they have very strange rules about work and where they live and how they live and stuff like that. But they are living in their car, so it's like it cannot be worse than that. So they accept, they go there, and at the beginning it seems to all be going fine, and then it starts getting more and more unsettling as it goes. It gets very sexual very fast, and I don't know why it needed to be this sexual. I would have preferred the um, unsettling elements to be less sexual, but it was what it was. And yeah, I thought it was fine. I mean, I wanted to know what happened. I wanted to continue reading, but at the same time, it was making me very, very uncomfortable in ways that had nothing to do with um, the unsettlement of a dystopian. And I didn't need that. So yeah, I think it was fine, but it's not my favorite Margaret Atwood, and I I could have gone without reading it as well. Yeah, those are all the books that I read in December. Some better than others, some more successful than others. If I had to recommend any of these forward, I think these two would be the ones that I would recommend the most. I had a really fun time with this, and I thought it was making some very good social points, and I think this is a very inspiring book, and it's also important to learn what's going on in Russia. I think it gives tools to fight the regime, especially if you have any connection to Russia. I think this is a must. So yeah, those are my books for December. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have read any of these books, what you thought about them, if you enjoyed them, and on the next video, bye!